Hi, and welcome to 5 Facts About Reading and Why Reading Programs Fail. I'm Dr. Amy Moore, and I am your presenter for today's webinar. Here's just a little bit about me. I'm a cognitive psychologist for LearningRx at the headquarters of the largest network of brain training centers in the world. I'm VP of Research at Gibson Institute of Cognitive Research, editor-in-chief of Modern Brain Journal, co-host of the podcast Brainy Moms, and I'm a former curriculum specialist and teacher of teachers. But best of all, I'm a mom of 3. So let's get started. Reading fact number 1. Reading is hard because the English language is confusing. Well, what's so confusing about English? To start, we have 26 letters, but 43 sounds. You can do the math, but that doesn't really add up. Those sounds actually have 400 different spelling patterns too. We've got silent letters, long and short vowels, soft and hard consonants, diphthongs, digraphs, and blends, vowels controlled by the letter R, compound words, word families, and same letters that when you turn them upside down or backwards, make a different letter or sound, like P, D, B, and Q. We also have more than 1 million words, accents on different syllables, and schwas. Schwas are the lazy pronunciation of a vowel, like in the word alone. Because of all these elements, we have created phonics rules. But rules apply only about 60% of the time. So we create exceptions to the rules, like I before E except after C. And when a word doesn't fit a rule or an exception to the rule, we just make you memorize it. Those words are called sight words, and we have hundreds of them. And as if all that wasn't bad enough, we have idioms. Idioms are phrases that don't mean what they actually say, like it's raining cats and dogs outside. And it's estimated that we have 10,000 idioms in our language. We also have homonyms, homophones, and homographs. Homonyms are words spelled and pronounced the same but have different meanings, like fall can be a verb but also a season. Homophones are words with the same sound but different spelling and meanings, like the words to, and to. And homographs are words with the same spelling but different sounds and meanings, like dove is a bird and also the past tense of the verb to dive. So let's look at some homophones. They're super hard. The bandage was wound around the wound. The farm was used to produce produce. The soldier decided to desert his dessert in the desert. They were too close to the door to close it. When I saw a tear in the painting, I shed a tear. That was super hard. So English is confusing. If you look at languages around the world, it's hard by comparison. So Maltese, Finnish, Albanian, Georgian, Turkish, and Spanish are highly phonetic, meaning the words in that language are spelled like they sound. Languages like German, Hungarian, Portuguese, and modern Greek are a little bit phonetic, but English is highly non-phonetic. In fact, most phonetic languages don't even have the verb to spell because the act of spelling out words is rarely needed, since most words are spelled exactly as they sound. Okay, reading fact number 2. Reading is hard because many people don't have the underlying learning skills needed to read. Well, what do I mean by that? This is called the learning model. It shows the core cognitive or underlying learning skills we use in reading. And here's what happens as we read a paragraph. First, we visually recognize individual letters and combination of letters. That's visual processing. Then we make an auditory interpretation of the sounds and letters and letter combinations that they represent. We have to understand how these sounds link together to form the grammatical structures and spellings of syllables and whole words. All of that is auditory processing. Then we work out the meaning of the words from vocabulary we've already learned. That's long-term memory and logic and reasoning. And we have to maintain focus and remember what words we've already read and what they've told us. That's attention and working memory. To fluently read the paragraph requires processing letters into sounds in less than 1/10 of a second. And to adequately comprehend what you read, all of this needs to be synchronized at the same rate as we speak. That's processing speed. So let's look at that same process inside the brain. This is a model of the brain networks activated during reading. You can see those same skills at work in various parts of the brain and the interaction between those parts as reading occurs. Well, what if we had a weakness in one or more of those skills? This diagram shows how the reading process would be interpreted. The blue and green arrow around the clock represents the reading process from seeing lines and shapes on the page, identifying them as a letter or word, then automatically processing a familiar word, scanning our known vocabulary, grasping the meaning, then visualizing with imagery and evaluating the context, comprehending the greater meaning, and moving on to the next word. This process, when working in a proficient reader, takes about 150 milliseconds or less for each word. But now look at the orange and red arrows. Those represent possible interruptions in the reading process. Things like not recognizing a word means that speed and fluency are lost. If you can't sound it out or blend words, you fail. Further on in the cycle, you may have been able to read the word, but you don't know the word. And if you guess the wrong meaning, then you fail at reading comprehension. So these are time-consuming detours on the reading process. Let's look at a study we conducted last year on more than 4,000 children. We tested children previously diagnosed with specific learning disorder in reading or dyslexia. And here's what we found. Although it's fairly common knowledge that auditory processing skills are weaker in children with reading disabilities, it's not as commonly known that there are actually a cluster of weak cognitive skills, including working memory, long-term memory, and processing speed. This makes sense. A recent study found that the ability to retrieve phonological information from long-term memory is the most important factor in reading fluency. Here's a slide from the same study. It represents the cognitive profiles of children with previously diagnosed specific learning disorder in reading or dyslexia across childhood. That same cluster of weak cognitive skills is consistent from age 5 through 18. But look what happens in the absence of an effective reading intervention. Those skills continue to get worse. Schoolwork gets harder with age, so that's not an encouraging combination. This is a great illustration of the reading and writing performance that we see in school. We see the tip of the iceberg above the waterline, while the underlying cognitive skills responsible for reading and writing ability are hidden below the surface. We have to address those too, and we'll talk about how shortly. Reading fact number 3. Reading comprehension requires much more than reading fluency. There are at least 7 key skills needed for reading comprehension. Reading fluency. Fluency is the foundation for comprehension, which requires speed and accuracy, so readers can expend less effort on decoding and more attention on understanding. Remember that cycle diagram we looked at with all the time-consuming detours? That's why good readers need a strong foundation of cognitive and auditory processing skills. Visualization. Comprehension requires strong visualization skills, which research shows is necessary for comparing ideas, making analogies, connecting ideas, understanding abstractions, organizing meaning, and also retaining information. Comprehension also requires knowledge of high-frequency words and exposure to grade-level content in all curriculum areas to build vocabulary. Reading comprehension requires the critical ability to hold sequences of information in working memory while processing incoming new data. We call that sequential processing. Reading comprehension also requires strong working and long-term memory for both retrieval and retention of information that's being compared, analyzed, connected, and organized. Reading comprehension requires strong reasoning skills as well. skills that are critical for analyzing, connecting, understanding, and applying new information. And finally, reading comprehension requires the ability to self-monitor your understanding of what's being read and then make internal adjustments in attention and reading speed, and to be able to self-correct and improve reading performance. That's called metacognition or metacognitive strategies. Okay, reading fact number 4. Reading problems are widespread. According to the 2019 Nations Report Card and the National Assessment of Education Progress, NAEP, 65% of fourth graders are below proficient in reading. Only 26% are proficient, and those numbers haven't really improved over the last 25 years. Here's another way to look at reading proficiency over time. Less than a third of fourth graders can read at or above a proficient level. And the story is about the same for eighth graders. 56% of eighth graders score below proficient on the NAEP in 2019, and less than a third can read proficiently. When asked if they believe in their ability to explain something they have read, only 36% of fourth and eighth graders believe they could. Why is this a problem? Well, in a study of almost 10 million students in 30,000 schools across America, 82% of students who failed English in sixth grade didn't graduate from high school. This is not a projection. This is actually real-world data. Okay, reading fact number 5. Reading programs fail when they focus on the wrong skills. There are 3 main approaches to school-based reading instruction: whole language or whole word, phonics, and cueing. So whole language and whole word approach is exposing children to books and print-rich environments and having them memorize words. Phonics is teaching children to match letters and sounds and focusing on decoding skills. And cueing is using context cues to predict what a word might be, like using your picture power. What are the problems with the whole word approach? Well, children memorize 20,000 words by age 10, but there are 1 million words, and you can't spell without encoding instruction. Problems with the phonics approach is that you learn 26 letters, but there are 43 sounds. So it requires memorizing rules and exceptions to the rules, and it requires memorizing sight words that don't fit the rules or the exceptions, and that's like 60% of words. And the problems with the cueing approach is that books won't always have pictures, and guessing only works about half the time. You don't get much instruction in decoding or spelling. And I think it's important to say that some schools combine approaches, taking a little from each of these. But the strongest evidence for reading intervention is a program that develops awareness of the segments of sounds in speech and how they link to letters. It teaches students to decode words, analyze word parts, and write and recognize words. And it uses explicit and intense instructional methods that drill to 100% mastery and that have a low teacher-to-student ratio. A ratio of 1 to 3 is recommended. So reading programs fail when they focus on the wrong skills. An ineffective focus includes ignoring weak cognitive skills, instructing instead of training and drilling, relying on too many sight words, creating too many exceptions to rules, placing and leaving children in reading levels. Why is that a problem? Keeping kids in reading levels waters down grade level material, and they may not be able to read and understand a newspaper article or an instruction manual or anything with real life value later. Plus, doesn't every child deserve to engage with content meant for their grade level? What does an effective focus look like? Developing core cognitive or underlying learning skills, using a sound to code approach, training alternative spellings and code overlap, drilling for automaticity, 100% mastery, and reading fluency. I want to share a little bit about the reading program at LearningRx, as well as the results. ReadRx is delivered with cognitive training methods, including intense, targeted, sequenced one-on-one training. The focus is on remediating weak cognitive skills first. Remember the part of the iceberg underneath the water? Then it adds training in phonemic awareness, sound analysis, decoding, encoding, and writing. Next, it progresses to simple and then complex codes. It builds with the most probable to least probable spellings, and then presents alternatives and code overlaps, but without rules. It's presented in a way that is most consistent with our inconsistent language. Let's look at the outcomes from over 9,000 children who have completed the ReadRx program. These are the test results from the Woodcock-Johnson tests of achievement presented in percentiles. Remember that we're concerned with anything below the 38th percentile, which is almost every average score that fell below at pretest in blue. And at post-test, those scores all fell solidly within the average range. Here are the same test results presented in age equivalent scores. You can see a 5.6-year gain in sound awareness and a 2.4-year gain in word attack. And these are the cognitive skill results. These are important, remember, because they are the underlying skills required for reading. And this first chart is presented in percentiles. And now in age equivalents, including an impressive 4-year gain in long-term memory, 4.7 years in visual processing, 3.7 years in logic and reasoning, 3.2 years in working memory, and 3.1 years in attention. And now I briefly want to share a little bit about the reading comprehension program called ComprehendRx. ComprehendRx is also delivered with cognitive training methods, intense, targeted, sequenced one-on-one training, and it's the complementary program to ReadRx. It adds training in reading fluency, vocabulary, visualization, sequential processing, memory, reasoning, and metacognition. All those key skills we discussed that are needed for proficient reading comprehension. So these are the outcomes from 766 children who completed the ComprehendRx program. These are the test results from the Woodcock-Johnson test of achievement presented in percentiles. So the pretest scores are in blue and the post-test scores in purple all fell solidly within the average range. And now these are the same test results presented in age equivalents. And you can see a 3.5-year gain in reading comprehension and a 3.8-year gain in understanding directions. So while reading is a problem in America and has been for more than 2 decades, there is hope. There are interventions like ReadRx and ComprehendRx that are available to help. And when looking for a program, make sure the focus is on the right skills. Reading requires strong cognitive skills, so make sure you choose a program that recognizes cognitive skills as a key component of the reading process.